we've seen a move in the world tour to nasal patches that open your airwaves.
Yeah.
Do we differentiate breathing between nasal breathing and mouth breathing, or what's going on between those two, or is it just collectively we're calling it breathing?
No, there's a number of benefits to nasal breathing. The least obvious, but one that's not talked about that most is the fact that there are sensors in your nasal patches that actually help incorporate diaphragmatic breathing. So as air flows through your nasal passages, you actually stimulate the opposite hemidiaphragm. So if you breathe in through your right nostril, you'll actually stimulate the left hemidiaphragm. When you breathe in through the right, it stimulates the opposite one. So there's better diaphragmatic involvement with nasal breathing than mouth breathing. And that's probably the biggest effect of the nasal patches. Is it just opens up airways and allows a bigger space for air to get in. And some of these athletes are breathing such massive volumes that it's actually their mouths aren't big enough to move the air. So that opening up the nasal passages actually, and it also bronchodilates some of the smaller airways. So the number of benefits to nasal breathing, and those patches help just make a little bit more space for air to move through.
Yeah, I've had a broken nose since I was a kid playing football, and like I had it fixed, but I don't think the surgeon done a very good job of fixing it. I find the patches really change my level of breath, like significantly.
And what you can do if you have access to a device. I'm also involved with a Canadian company called VO2 Master, which allows for us to measure tidal volumes and respiratory frequency as well as oxygen consumption in real time. And you can actually put a mask on, and you can actually see someone's tidal volumes change, or the volume that they breathe with each breath. You can actually see them change when they start incorporating nasal breathing into their breathing patterns.
Here's one for you. You can dispel this as some idle gossip or based in science. I've heard whispers, I'll call them words around a campfire, that if you look at Jumbo Visma's infection rate this year, it's gone up relative to previous years with the nasal breathing strips and apparently shaving their nostril hair to get even more in. And I was wondering, like, is nostril hair like a natural filtration and now there's more bacteria getting in?
Absolutely is. It absolutely is. So I won't comment on whether shaving nasal hair will increase your risk for infection, but it is absolutely, nasal hair is absolutely a filter, and it's a filter for viruses, and it's covered in mucus to pick up little bits of debris. So it filters dust, it filters smoke, it filters viruses, it filters bacteria. So yeah, don't get rid of your nasal hair. Yeah.
My uncle with good bushy nasal hair will be happy to hear that. Never been sick in his life.
Yeah. No, the nasal passages are very complicated inside, and so they're covered in mucus, but they're also covered. They have a very thin layer of cells that are rich in blood flow, and so it actually warms and smooths the airflow as you breathe in. So one of the breathing patterns that we teach to improve performance is to slow the breathing down and use less frequency, so slower breathing but bigger volumes. And if you do that through your nose, that airflow is much smoother and causes less irritation. So when listeners of yours are riding really hard and they lose their control of their breathing, which everybody does at maximum intensity, everybody loses control. They go from a rhythmic breathing pattern to a dysfunctional hyper breathing pattern. And that irritation, a lot of people will feel afterwards, after their workout or their race is done, they feel this kind of ground glass feeling in their lungs where it just feels irritated. And that's the turbulence of airflow that people get. And
if you've ridden in the velodrome, you'll experience that a lot. I think we just got in velodrome.
And anybody who's gone all out in any effort at some point has felt that feeling of being, oh my God, I can't move enough air anymore. And it causes irritation. And that's what is diagnosed as exercise-induced asthma in people who it happens at a lower intensity. And exercise-induced asthma really is just a dysfunctional breathing pattern. There's almost nobody that has an actual problem with their lungs. They have a problem with breathing. And if they just slow their breathing down and control breathing through their nose, they would eliminate the symptoms of the irritation and tightness that happens with asthma.
So I would say almost no athletes that I know are currently siloing and focusing on respiratory training separate to their actual training. If someone is to listen to the podcast right now, is to buy into this and they're to start protocols, which we'll get onto in a little bit, what sort of gains can an athlete realistically expect across, the key metrics that cyclists love, like VO2 max improvements, threshold improvements, sprint improvements, or endurance improvements?
Everybody that we've ever, all of our team members use breathing training in their past. We didn't train anybody who didn't use respiratory training. So we have this cohort of people that we train for years that have really good breathing patterns and have bigger volumes, and the respiratory system is no longer a limitation to their performance. So the only way, there's lots of studies that now coming out. The most recent one is Thomas Kowalski, published out of Poland, did a bunch of research in short track speed skaters, cross-country skiers, swimmers. All of them have shown improvement in performance, and it depends on what your performance level is. The most interesting one we saw this year was from France, was Cyril Ritchie was using our device for 48 weeks. So he did a 1-year study, and he was using pro cyclists. So they're at the top of their game. They improved their breathing dynamics by 8 to 9%. So their tidal volume, their biggest breath that they could take, they improved it by 10%. So they went from an enormous lung volumes of 6.5, 7 liters up to 7.7 liters. And when you take someone who's an adult training at a high level, you think there's no way we're going to improve their respiratory system. They actually improve the volumes. They improve their ability to move that air. But the fascinating thing is they improve their FTP by 6%.
Interesting. That's huge for a pro.
At a pro level. And that was on average. And he had 20 athletes in this cohort. So when you say no one's using breathing training, there are people using it. They're just not telling anybody that they're using it. So there were at least 10 athletes at the tour that were using our device that had shown a 6% improvement in their FTP in the 48 weeks leading up to the Tour de France.
Sepp Kuss is one of them. I know it. He just looks like he's nose breathing on climbs.
So it's funny because I actually don't know who they are, because they're not coached by us. They're coached by this brilliant French guy who unfortunately doesn't speak English, and my French I haven't spoken French since high school, so I don't speak enough French. So I'm having to read through his study, and he's openly published his results with the names redacted. Yeah. But the study, so
what sort of protocols were these guys doing?
The answer would be 6 to 10%.
Okay, you got my attention. What sort of protocols are these guys doing for this?
Yeah, and he published the protocol. So he, over 48 week, he actually did. He addressed all the different areas of respiratory management. So the first 6 weeks was learning how to breathe, how to incorporate your diaphragm, how to slow breathe using nasal breathing, how to incorporate different patterns at different intensities. That was the first 6 weeks. The second 6 weeks, he added a higher level with some coordination training, so a little bit higher respiratory frequency work. Then he added some resistance training to the next 6 weeks. Then he added another version of it into the time trial mode in aero position. And so every 6 weeks, he was developing the program to adapt to the athletes that he was training, till he actually developed athletes that could take big, big breaths and move really, really fast when they needed to, under controlled circumstances, and incorporate as much nasal breathing as he could. And that, in a 40-year period, gave him 6 to 8% of improvements in their FTP.
I can remember vividly a December training spin. I was on the back roads, there was fog, wet leaves, potholes everywhere. I was riding on a descent, one-handed, trying to stab this tiny little mode button and praying the battery would last until the final climb of the day. You know that anxiety, the is it going to die anxiety, it totally ruins your ride. And the truth is, for years, that was normal. Every season I got into this repetitive cycle. I'd end up buying a new set of lights in the winter. Normally plastic lights, plastic brackets which would invariably snap, charging ports which would fail, and batteries that would fade. Most lights feel very disposable. They're shiny for the winter and then straight into the bin at the end of the winter, and we repeat again the following winter. That all changed when I got my first set of exposure lights. Suddenly this wasn't a consumable anymore. This was a piece of kit built to last a lifetime. That's why I'm absolutely buzzing about the fully updated exposure range. Reflex 2.0 automatically adjusts the brightness of your light. It dials it down when you're going at slower speeds on the climbs, and then it unleashes the full power of the lumens on the descent, so your hands stay where they need to be, on the bars, so you don't actually crash. There's another really cool feature. It's called reserve mode, and it kicks in when runtime hits 0. It drops to a low beam and you get another 30 minutes to get you out of trouble and get you home. USB-C charging is a total game changer to my mind. It means you can get now 70% faster charging, but importantly for me, you can top up your lights from a power bank mid-ride. So if you're doing an ultra, a bike packing trip, or you're going on an event like me at Badlands, just plug it into the power bank and away you go. No need to worry about batteries failing. Exposure isn't just another set of lights. This is the last set of lights you're ever going to need to buy. Go to exposurelights.com to check out their full range.